Welcome to this edition of Inside the Academy Studio.
Today's conversation will be about Spike Jonze' Her. Her is directed by Spike Jonze and is an original screenplay by Spike. It's a love story of the times. It tells the story of a letter writer, Theo, played by Joaquin Phoenix, who is in a very lonely and depressed state when we meet him. But after he purchases a piece of computer technology, an OS, he develops a relationship with Samantha, the lead voice of this OS, voiced by Scarlett Johansson. And what becomes is a deep and moving relationship that should be burden-free, but has all the intense pathos that any loving and long relationship has. I'm going to bring in my co-host now to further discuss Her.
Well, I think a lot of people, maybe when they saw the trailer and eventually when they saw the movie, they're going to draw the comparison to Blade Runner. Blade Runner also similar about androids, so artificial intelligence trying to find their purpose in the world. So you can see the same comparison, or actually I'm gonna open up. Can you see that same comparison with Her? Do you see Samantha trying to find a human connection as a non-human in this movie?
I can clearly see that. I think I really go back to one of the first things that Samantha says after she's activated, saying that her, I guess, instincts will only grow. You know, from when she meets Theo first to where she leaves Theo at the end, completely different person. More complex thoughts, more complex feelings. It's really definitely, if you say point A to point B, it's a journey that OS takes. So I can see the comparison that this AI is learning more about itself while it learns more about the human condition, and then it kind of blends together to what Samantha becomes.
Yeah, definitely. That's why, sure, I think the main difference here is that Samantha doesn't have a body, and that's brought up in this movie. So I think that's the reason why this movie differentiates itself from other, robots and human interactions that we've seen in sci-fi, and also the fact that it's because we already have, in a very primitive way, we already have this technology existing in our world today. So I think, and one thing I noticed was that the setting was it was a different Los Angeles, obviously the Los Angeles like Shanghai. But it seemed like a path that we could be heading towards in terms of what the setting looks like, and even maybe the technology won't be that advanced in the future, but how we interact with technology, I think it really hits the mark in that respect.
Yeah, I think that's the brilliance of Spike Jonze' script, that it's not so far-fetched. He's taking things we know and are becoming more familiar with, the voice-activated phones, and kind of integrating it with a society that he feels that we're heading towards. It's I don't know if it's totally correct, but it's an interesting play of using what's familiar, setting it a little in the future, and then kind of seeing how it plays. Now, I know our main protagonist here is Theo, and he has Samantha, but then he also has a lot of, I guess, unresolved issues with his soon-to-be ex-wife, Catherine, played by Rooney Mara. What do you think his relationship is, if you were to compare his relationship with Samantha to Catherine, do you see parallels, or do you see him kind of becoming anew and doing new things with Samantha that he didn't do, or that we found out that he didn't do with Catherine?
Yeah, I think there are parallels. I think it's clear in both, at the start of both relationships, he clearly sees something new in each woman, quote unquote, that he's met, but then eventually he moves away from them in different ways. In Her, he has second thoughts about the relationship in general, but eventually comes to terms with it. But it leads to Samantha actually leaving him in the end, of course. Yeah. But in Rooney Mara's case, with her name Catherine, right?
Catherine, yes.
Yeah. So that's different because she feels like he's being alienated by him rather than drifting away. He feels like he put his standards too high for her and feel like he couldn't meet that. And she even brings that up in like why he was attracted to an OS, because she wouldn't be bounded by human characteristics, right? I think it's different. It's different, but it's similar at the same time.
Exactly, and I think the perfect ending is the fact that when it's revealed that Samantha's having relationships with 8,000 people and 600 are loving relationships, it's kind of a realization to Theo that, he had such difficulty, or that relationship before with Catherine had such difficulty on one-on-one basis to now go where he's being, paid attention to by somebody who's distracted in many ways. That's totally different from what I think Theo does, because Theo's pretty consistent, I think. The things he did in the early relationship, he's positive support. He carries that over to his relationship with Samantha, but you can kind of see that these two women have, different paths of how they accept Theo. Anything else you have on more of the plot and the narrative?
Well, I think we touched on it before. I found the setting to be very utopian. And by that, I mean, it seems to be a society where things like, the money, crime, and things like that, they were never really brought in this movie. This movie is just about relationships.
Yeah. Well, I honestly thought as a film, you could say that the society had become almost entirely narcissistic, that everybody was, with their OSs, they were talking to themselves. They were so self-involved that issues of society almost didn't matter. And I don't think we saw many issues of, greater healing, growth, development, issues about, health. There was a lot of just self-involvement that it could have been utopia, but it could have been a terrible society. But we were just looking at people talking to themselves almost.
Yeah, and if you actually look at the statistics on things like crime, it actually has decreased. And a lot of sociologists are saying that that's because people are spending more time indoors and with their computers.
That's interesting. Moving on. One of the decisions Spike Jonze made was initially Samantha was voiced by Samantha Morton, who you may know her from in America, I believe.
Max and Ruby.
Max and Ruby, okay. And Minority Report. Yeah. But he made the decision to change it to Scarlett Johansson. And I think it kind of changed the tone of the film in the sense that Scarlett Johansson plays she's a desirable person in real life, and her voice is one of her trademarks. How do you think the decision went first to choose Scarlett Johansson in this role, and then the life that Scarlett Johansson brought to the voice of Samantha as being, it's hard to play opposite, many actors say opposite visual effects, but it must be equally hard for somebody like Joaquin Phoenix to play against a voice that initially wasn't even Scarlett Johansson. So can you comment on any of those two things?
Yeah, I think Joaquin Phoenix was able to get the most out of the performance because I think we touched on it before. Like he didn't. His character was consistent with the entire movie, so I think he kept his performance similar. And whether he was interacting with Amy Adams, whether he was interacting with Rooney Mara, and whether he was interacting with the voice, which initially was Samantha Morton, and of course in the final film was Scarlett Johansson.
No, I agree, and I think what underscores Joaquin's performance is and we talked about this a lot similar to Barkhad Abdi and Captain Phillips, is that there's a real sense of wonder. Like there's discovery here. And Abdi's part, it was maybe discovering what it meant to be an actor. But Joaquin is, when you're interacting with something that is you can't feel in a physical sense, you need to have an openness to it. And you could see that in his performance. Facial expressions, the way he acts. He's very open to acting towards the elements. When he's in one of the better scenes with Samantha, and he's kind of just feeling and taking her on her trip, you can feel that he's adapting to the environment, and that a lot of credit has to go to Joaquin. Now, I know you touched on Amy Adams. We talked about Rooney Mara. What do you think the role of these real women per se was, and what characters do you think, or what actors did you think did a good job in doing that role?
Yeah, I think I really was sold on Amy Adams' performance. I think halfway through the movie, I remarked is that really his sister and not just like an actual friend? Because they successfully, Amy Adams and Joaquin's chemistry together, they were able to successfully sidestep any sort of sexual tension that you commonly see in any movie, any TV show when a male and female are friends. It truly felt like...
That's a good point.
Yeah, it truly felt like a platonic relationship.
Yeah, no, and I think Rooney Mara does a great job of, forming this almost mythical ex-wife of his that we kind of see the layers after. And then a great little cameo by Olivia Wilde playing this weird futuristic woman. People, look and act differently, but it seems like Olivia Wilde can, exist in any time. What we say is a huge catalyst to this film, and looks like the first film that, it is the first film that Spike Jonze has actually written himself and directed. Spike Jonze, obviously coming from the world of music and obviously having great, more alternative, edgy films, whether it being being John Malkovich, Adaptation, once again has taken a risk, I think. It's hard to say that risk in the sense that nobody else, I think, would tell this story other than Spike Jonze. He has, I guess, that touching the nerve of culture. He's not old, he's not that old, he's not that young, but he kind of strikes the right balance of what a film, and I started at the beginning, a film of this time, We say that every so often. Social Network is a film of this time. And Her really felt like that. So how do you think Spike Jonze was so able to make this film be so contemporary, but still seem modern and, have all those great, what we say, the hipster ways to it?
Yeah, I think part of it has to do with, it's like the Six Sigma approach, to steal a term. I think every single step of this movie seems like it fits in with the vision he has. So the vision he has is to make a movie that of the times, so he includes things that people of the time can relate to. But then he also includes a setting that is in the future, but then seems like it is a future that we can actually reach one day.
No, I agree, and it's truly imaginative in the sense that even scenes with video games, he kind of makes it a larger version of what we do when Wii and Xbox Connect and PlayStation Move, and he makes that more immersive. That's just subtle changes that the film set such in reality and what we know today, but then those little spots and flares of modern future that's pretty impressive for a movie that doesn't have a really high budget. Other Academy notes: it's being nominated for Best Original Song, Moon Song, which is sung by Karen O, and also its original screenplay. Any quick comments on those two things?
Oh yeah, I think we pretty much touched upon why it got nominated for Best Original Screenplay. It was a story that only Spike Jonze was able to successfully tell. And then Best Original Song, it fits what it really needs to do. Where after the movie ends, it's you get that little bit of emotional connection, and then you hear this song to cool you down. So I don't know if it'll win Best Song. I haven't seen all the movies yet, but if it's in the movie, that's all I can say.
Absolutely. We're almost nearing the end of this edition of Inside the Academy Studio, and like always, we like to end with questions. So I ask, what was your favorite moment in Her?
I think my favorite moment has to be when all the OSs go missing, including Samantha. So you see running around, looking around everywhere, and then he runs down, and I think it's it goes down to a subway platform, sits on the steps, and eventually Samantha reconnects. But then he learns about the truth that she's been talking to he's fallen in love with 681 people and has been talking to over 8,000 people at the same time. So I think it was really smart showing this emotional revelation while he's sitting there still and everything around him is still moving. And I think that touches upon what we talked about before, is that the society does seem a little more self-absorbed, a little more narcissistic. So while one man is having his problems, the rest of the world just goes on. And I think that scene really captures that.
No, that was a great scene. I'm going to go, we talked about the Moon Song, and it's briefly played near the middle of the film, and we're basically one of the more, I guess, emotional moments and touching moments between Samantha and Theo. They're in a cabin, and You kind of see Theo open up. He does some funky dances. It's a great touching moment of basically, if there were two people discovering and finding joy in in the early stages of a relationship. Okay, what was your least favorite moment in Her?
I think it's not really a moment. It's really a part of the script where Theo's job is to write letters of love to other people. Sure, I think we talked about this in Utopia, that this type of market would exist in the future, but it seemed a little too far of a stretch.
No, I agree. That was a weird job description. That was one of my weaker moments, but I kind of went with. They kept meeting. I know we really liked Amy Adams' part and Joaquin's chemistry, but the meetings in the elevator, to me, like, how often are you meeting in an elevator, and how often are you dumping so much revelatory and exploratory information about this relationship? So, I liked it when they eventually moved into a room and they were talking. How much elevator talking can you really have? Okay. One of the last things we like to do is word association. So when you think Her, what do you think of?
Email.
And I think of video games. So when we think of Her, we think of email and video games. That is this edition of Inside the Academy Studio.
Thank you.